Hey, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about solving inequalities. So that's our target. You're going to be able to solve and graph inequalities. So right here, you may or may not remember this from previous math classes, but those four things are your symbols. So this is saying that less than, the symbol less than, means we shade to the left and the circle is open. So here's my example. Shading to the left, the circle is open. The next symbol is less than or equal to, and we also shade to the left. The circle is closed, meaning I include that number as my solution. So I could have like x is less than or equal to 2. So that means I would include 2 and anything to the left of that. So 2 would make it a true statement, or 1, or 0, or negative 10.1, they would all make it a true statement. And that's what the arrow is telling you. It's pointing the direction of true solutions. Now we switch going the other way. So this symbol means greater than, and we shade to the right. The circle is open. So here's our example. Open circle, meaning I do not include that number as a solution. That's just where I start, and it's everything, in this case, everything that is greater than that number. And then the last one is greater than or equal to. We shade to the right as well. And this circle is closed, because once again, I'm including everything in everything to the right and everything that's inside of that circle. Please take note of this. When you multiply or divide by a negative, you must switch or flip the sign. So here I'm dividing by a negative. And notice I went from a greater than to a less than. Same thing over here. I'm multiplying by a negative. So I went from a greater than or equal to a less than or equal to. One thing that I want to point out up here, shading to the left or to the right only works if the variable is on the left-hand side. So here, this is on the left-hand side. This arrow, if you want to think of it as an arrow, is kind of pointing to the left. Well, that's the way my arrow goes. This one is also pointing to the left. That's the way my arrow goes. Okay, so that's a trick that might help you to graph these. Okay, so now we are at the point where we're going to solve. And we solve these just like in an equation. So if this symbol confuses you, think of it in terms of an equation. 3 times y equals 48. Well, how would I undo that multiplication? I would divide both sides by 3. And so that's what we're doing. The only new step, if you will, is now we have to graph. So we solved, but now we have to graph. So my variable's on the left. My arrow is kind of pointing to the left. Right, this arrow is pointing to the left, so my arrow is going to the left. 16, and it's an open circle. Here's some more examples. These are just two-step equations, but we do the same thing. So let's look at letter C. I start by adding 1. Negative 1 plus 1 cancels. I'm left with negative 11y is less than 43. And now I'm dividing by a negative. So I divided by a negative. I switch that sign from a less than to a greater than. And there's my switching of the sign, going from less than to greater than. And then I graph it. My variable's on the left. The arrow here is pointing to the right. So I draw an arrow to the right. It's an open circle. And then the last part I want to talk about is number 5. It says match the following graphs with the correct inequality statement. Each question has only one answer, and not all answers will be used. We're going to break this into manageable steps. Step 1, where is the dot? The dot is at negative 2. So right away, I've only got 2 options. All these other ones don't work. 3, 4, 5, and 6, not options. Because I'm starting at negative 2. My bolded arrow is going to the left, so my inequality should go to the left. That one does not go to the left. This one does point to the left. So this is a representation of x is less than -2. Letter B. There's my point, 2.5, 2.5. 2.5, 2.5. Those are my only two options. My arrow is pointing to the left, so I find which one the arrow or the symbol is pointing to the left, and it is this one. And then the last one starts at -1. That's where my dot is, at -1, and it's pointing to the right this time. So I find my symbol that's pointing to the right, and it's this one right here. So these inequalities are just like solving an equation. Now you're doing the opposite operation to undo that. So the opposite operation of addition is subtracting, and then to undo multiplication, I will